Nature and our connection with the animals, the birds, and everything around us is so divine. Our very presence, our very peaceful nature, and our ability to observe and be sensitive to the nature around us brings us into connection with the animals, the birds, and really everything around us is a mirror of our own self. To experience that closeness with the animals and a rapport that happens when we sit and observe, be still, be quiet, and be very, very present. And we find that the animals come close to us. Once upon a time, I had a friend, a bulbul friend, a small bird, and I think at a very young age, I come across him and I started feeding. And slowly, as I started feeding and putting out food, slowly I would hold my hand up just above the surface of the balcony, and the bulbul started to fly onto the hand. So from that moment onwards, become nearly an 8 years relationship with this one bulbul. A very special experience, and so much we can learn from the birds and their antiques and their mannerisms and how they operate. It used to fascinate me how they see and how they can see things so definely in an area and be so observant that every time I'd come out onto the balcony and put some food, all of a sudden the birds would appear, even though I may not see the birds. So there's this sense of perception and awareness in the environment which they're monitoring all the time. So when I'd put out food for these birds, then all of a sudden there might be half a dozen birds around. So this one bulbul was very, very special, and he was such a joy to be around, and he would come into the house and he'd take food from the hand, and I'd play, and then sometimes I'd tease him as well with the food. He had a partner. She would never come on the hand. I tried, but she refused to come on the hand, and yet I'd throw food to her on the ground, and she would take that. But I tried so much for Bulbul's partner to come on the hand. But Bulbul was very special. He would come in the house. When I'd whistle, he'd come and he'd take it. I'd roll his little pieces of dates. And even right down as far as the meditation dome, that was Bulbul's area. So he could come down to near the dome, but past the dome was the other bulbul's area. So they had their own distinct areas, and they kept within those spaces. So when I'd come up from art department, I'd carry this little Katori tin, and that was always in my pocket. So when I was walking up past the dome, I would whistle, and then Bulbul would fly down and he'd have something to eat. And this may be 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day if I was around. Especially in the monsoon, it seemed the monsoon was a time when they were more hungry, it seemed, and they would feed 5, 6 times a day. And of course with people coming up to the house, and it was such a nice thing to just whistle and the bird come down to land on your hand and feed. And he was fearless. I think when we're really in a peaceful state and they build that trust with you, you couldn't really touch Bulbul. You could feed him, but you couldn't pat him or anything like that. They had that boundaries of that. But and of course, he would come in the house anytime the door was open, and I'd whistle. He'd come in and have a feed, and then he'd fly off again. So I remember one time I was they had babies, little baby bulbuls, and I thought, I'd film this, and and see how the filming would, how I could document the process. But even I just fed the bulbul, and when I went to take the film of the bulbul flew over my head and actually pecked me on the top of the head and spiked me with his little claws. And he was saying, okay, the children, there was this instinctive protection for the children, even though there was this relationship. I could feed the bulbul, but when it come to be near the babies, there was this instinctive characteristic took over. So that very much surprised me, and of course made me aware that the instinct is much, much more stronger. Then just of recently, the last years, is these red spur fowls, and these are a teenage couple. I say the teenage couple of the babies, and I've observed when the families have the baby chicks, they have them for so long, and then at about this age, they're pushed out of the family circle and they have to find their own way and support themselves. So this is interesting. And slowly, there's this relationship with these, and they will come and actually they will knock on the front door when they want something to eat. So this would happen at least 2 times a day, in the morning and evening. So that was very special with these birds. And just the feeling of having the birds, they land on you, and there's this presence of them, and they're very, very, very shy and very timid, and yet they have that trust. And I think when we're really still and we're really present, we can connect with the wildlife. Sometimes I remember being in the nature and being so still, and then just observing the different animals, and when they come out in the day, when they return in the evening, and when you sit very still, you can observe all these things around, and it's such a beauty to see all the different species, and especially when there's no fear, when they don't have fear of you and you don't have fear of them, then they put on a different display, which is quite magical and of course very, very entertaining. And here's some of the babblers. They're having some of the banana cake, which they love, banana cake. And here's Mum feeding the babies. And here is a very special friend. Now this is, I call her Miss Squirrel. And she was around for at least about 8 months. And this was so amazing to have this experience with this squirrel, because one day I went out the back, and the house, we have a little kitchen out the back, and laundry, and there's this squirrel run up the tree alongside and stopped about halfway. And I actually had some sourdough bread with me, so I slowly went up to the tree very, very gently, and I put my hand on the tree, and then I just had this piece of food in my hand, and slowly this squirrel come down the tree and it took this piece of food from my hand. And since that point, then every day I'd be out in the kitchen. When I was making bread, she'd come in the kitchen, and I was a little bit afraid I would step on her, but she was very, very alert, and then she'd run up my trousers and onto my curtain, and she wanted something to eat. So this was so wonderful, and just the feeling that this one was completely fearless. And one scene I had one time, I come round the corner of Solar House to the back kitchen, and there must have been a dozen squirrels all eating the seeds and that, which come when I cut the bread and the crumbs and all that. And out of the, say, 12 of these squirrels all run for the trees, to run up the trees, and this one, which I call Miss Squirrel, she was running the same speed the other way towards me for something to eat.